Hey everybody, this is Sid Sexton with my good friend Keith Glines with episode 108 of the Overlap podcast, where if you're new to the podcast, I don't know where you've been, welcome. The Overlap podcast is where we discuss, study, I don't know, have guests on about the overlaps between business, family, fitness, parenting, management, and really how you get better in one aspect of life. And we sort of use the realm of business of getting better at things. You inevitably become better, and you see the overlaps in all other aspects of your life. How you show up for the workouts, how you're going to show up at work. So that's what we've been working on for a few years, right, Keith?
That's right. The only thing I've ever done 108 times is eat a cheeseburger.
Eat a cheeseburger?
Yeah.
Big Mac light sauce?
Big Mac light sauce. I had one on the way home from Nashville, by the way.
God.
I couldn't stop it.
That's such a lack of discipline.
It's the best burger in the world.
The Big Mac?
Yeah.
Have you been to Five Guys?
Yeah. Better. McDonald's is better.
We just lost like 1,000 listeners right now. They just turned it off. Oh my God. Okay. I don't even know how we come back from that, but I'm going to try. So the Overlap podcast, we really try. Inevitably, we're going to touch on leadership. Inevitably, we're going to touch on, we're going to touch on business and leadership a good amount, and not necessarily because we think you are all business drivers and business leaders that are dying for one more leadership topic, but what we do is what we're thoughtful about is trying to bring you guests and topics that we think are relevant, that can help you in your everyday life, in all aspects of life. And today we've got we've got a guest. Sorry. Keith is still throwing me off with the Big Mac comment. I don't know. I'm trying to come back from that. I've got a guest on that I've known for a few years, that I think very highly of, that I've actually worked with a few times, and every time I see him around the community, I'm excited to kind of just check in with and glean a little bit of knowledge from, hopefully from osmosis, and just get some of that, and maybe some good looks and hair too. That'd be nice. And so today I bring to you, our audience, and to Keith. Maybe Keith will get some discipline out of this too.
Maybe
Brad,
so. Maybe I won't eat that burger.
He'll
on
say
the way.
no to the.
It was late at night.
Yeah,
I was weak.
You were waning. Keith's favorite comment. Brad Israel, welcome to the show, Brad.
Thanks for having me, guys. And I've got a confession to make. Is last night I was taking my oldest son to one-to-one dinner. We try to do that when the schedules allow.
Okay.
And we were going to go to a good Italian restaurant, and he audibled on me, and we ended up at Cookout.
Okay,
and I ate a bacon
understandable.
cheeseburger there last night. So I'm going to have to be on your side today, Keith. I'm going to apologize to Sid and say that I lost my discipline last night, but I didn't have any choices, so I did what I did.
I ate at Cookout for the first time a couple weeks ago. I'd never eaten there, and somebody wanted to go there for like $8. You get more food than you could possibly eat. Now I know why they put them by colleges.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
I think Cookout's good.
it was a pretty good place.
I think it's actually beef on those burgers, unlike the Big Mac, though. That's all I'm saying. I don't even know what that is.
But why do you have to get light sauce, Sid?
Well, because they make it special for you. It's not
Yeah,
like set
it's
aside.
hot. It's always hot. So you always say, it's not that I don't like the sauce. It's that I have to change it up, so they have to make it right then and there.
Do you think those people are just going, oh, yeah, we'll make a new one for that guy? Or
No,
they
they're
just
giving me
scrape
the
some of it
same
off?
one. They're giving me the same one.
That's what I think, too. All right. So, Brad, with your Cookout filled belly, and we did introduce you to Refuge Coffee and got you fired up on caffeine.
That's right.
Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you.
So, Brad, could you kind of introduce yourself to our audience? Just a little bit of background, a little bit about yourself, kind of where you grew up, what you did, and kind of how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah. So just depending on how much time you have, y'all
got
stop
plenty
me
of time.
at any point. But
That's the great thing about podcasts. We got plenty of time.
That's right. I grew up across the bay in Mobile and went to UMS Wright from kindergarten all the way through.
Okay.
and had a wonderful experience. Just a amazing upbringing. Older brother, younger sister. Ended up at college in Virginia, Southside Virginia, Hampton-Sydney College.
How did you get there?
They did a really good job of recruiting down on the Gulf Coast from Birmingham South. And so the dean of admissions, I'll never forget her, Anita Garland, she'd show up in cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. And that's how she came down and recruited from our area. And a couple guys in the class above my brother, being one of them, and then a couple guys even older than his class went there, and we went up and visited. And it was like this remote academic village in the middle of nowhere, Farmville, Virginia, 60 miles southwest of Richmond, and it was a work hard, play hard type of campus. So you missed more than 3 classes, then they were going to withdraw, fail you. So they taught you a little bit about accountability and discipline at that age. But on the weekends, it was a lot of fun, and it was just that you had hunting lockers, so you could keep your shotgun in a locker. You could hunt on campus. It was about 1,300 acres. So it was a kind of a man's paradise, is what I would say.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Sounds like it.
Holy cow.
And so ended up there, and a couple other guys from down here on the Gulf Coast, and there's actually some even from a great kid I met this summer from Fairhope, who actually was trying to go into the Coast Guard, was at the academy and had a some kind of medical disqualifier. He's playing football in Hampton-Sydney now, and he sent me a text recently. He met Oliver Anthony, the singer that's out of Farmville that published that song. He just sent me a text and he said, viral. "Hey, you won't believe this. I just ran into him downtown Farmville." So Farmville has made the map, probably more because of that than Hampton-Sydney being the 13th oldest college in the nation. But
Oliver Anthony is like taking the world by storm.
Yeah, isn't it wild?
Yeah. Did you hear him talk? Did you hear him talk about the song being played at the Republican convention?
Yes,
I did not.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. You should go back and listen to that clip.
Was that on Joe Rogan?
Yeah, it was.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll listen to that.
Yeah, so he's definitely gotten Farmville on the map. But it was a great spot for me. I considered going to Ole Miss and looked at some of the bigger SEC schools, and a good friend had applied early decision. So he said, "If I get in, will you join me up there?" And it removed that decision making, because as y'all recall, many years ago we got asked 1,000 times where you're going to go to college, and you just finally wanted to have an answer. And so that was
make a decision.
Yeah,
man.
So that was part of my decision making process back then when I was 17 years old, and. But it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I needed that small classroom environment to help me understand and kind of activate sides of the brain that I probably wasn't when I was in high school, when I was focused on football and extracurriculars and everything else. And
so dive into that a little bit. Like, what do you mean? Why? And I've got some assumptions. Why did you need the smaller class? Why did you need the discipline of miss 3 classes and they'll drop or fail you?
I think for me, it was because at that age, I was probably more reserved, and I wasn't going to be the one to speak up. And when you're in a class of 15 or 16, and it's all male, it's one of the only all male colleges in the U.S.
Oh goodness!
And now there are 4 female schools all around, and but your classroom environment was all male, and I think that probably helped me at that age to start to find my voice and start to ask questions, engage with professors, have those types of relationships with them. That if you did poorly in a class, you felt guilt for letting them down because of how much they were pouring into you. Man. The sharp difference was when I studied abroad. My junior year, I was in Australia, and I was in a classroom with probably 400, 500 people in an auditorium. Yeah. And you're just a number, and I had no relationship. I don't even think I ever met my professor, and I probably didn't go out of my way to try to meet my professor.
It'd be tough with 400 people.
Yeah, but I mean, it was just one of those experiences that at a larger school, I don't know, for me personally, if I would have been able to maintain the straight and narrow to say, okay, I've got to go do more work outside of class because I don't have these answers. Whereas at Hampton-Sydney, I could go follow them after class, plop in their chair and say, "Hey, Professor Kagan, can you explain? I have no clue what you just described. Can you explain this to me?"
I went to a school just like that. So
so it was perfect.
And it was awesome.
It was a great experience. But what happened at Hampton-Sydney my sophomore year is when 9/11 happened. And that really forced me to do some deep reflection on who was I, and take an inventory on how privileged and fortunate I was with the upbringing I had down here on the Gulf Coast and the opportunity to go to college, and really sent me on this journey to go discover what the military and service was all about. We had a remarkable mentor and former president emeritus of the college, General Sam Wilson, who, if any of the listeners want to do a little homework, just Google his name. He's one of our nation's most noble giants. He wrote the Doctrine for Special Forces. He was the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, deputy to the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. He selected the first 2 officers to go through Delta selection. He was a spy in the Soviet Union back in the day. He was just he was an incredible human being, patriot, just asset that we had at this campus. And so I really married up to General Sam and said, I want to learn everything I can. I want to go into the service. And actually, I want to drop out of school and go in. And he talked me out of it. He said, if you are this passionate about it, after you finish what you committed to, which is getting your degree, I'll be the first to endorse you to go in. And he said, but I'm going to strongly encourage you to finish school first, because this war isn't going anywhere and it's going to be here for a long time. We're fighting an ideology. We're fighting a radical movement, and it's going to need people that have seasoned experience and capable leaders and learners to go into service. And so I would challenge you to consider going the officer candidate route, which is what I did, which is what he had done after he had served in World War II. He enlisted. He lied about his age because he wanted to be over there after he heard Churchill's speech.
Yeah.
And he went to the armory there in Farmville and signed up. He was the youngest officer in the entire United States Army when he returned at the age of 17. He was a first lieutenant because of how many they had lost.
Wow.
And so he came home and that started his trajectory. He ended up going to the officer candidate school at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I could spend this entire morning talking about General Sam and the profound impact he had on me. I mean, he's right up there with my parents. I consider him part of my family just because of how much time he put into me. And so General Sam talked me out of dropping out of school. I said, well, I'd love to take your classes. And he said, my classes are reserved for seniors. And I was a sophomore. And I said, well, what do I need to do to get into your your U.S. intelligence course? And he said, well, I'll consider it, but you're going to write me a 6-page essay. And I said, yes, sir. And I went back. I wrote the essay on why I should be allowed in this class with a bunch of seniors. And I submitted it. And he said, be at my office this afternoon at 1600 hours and come sit before me, and we're going to talk about this. And it's probably the most nervous interview I've ever participated in.
I'm already nervous.
I went in there and I sat in his office was this beautiful old building in Winston Hall. And he had books lined on the walls and just pictures and memorabilia. And he had worked with every president essentially after his time in World War II and knew them at a personal level. And so you see these pictures of this just incredible leader and what he had accomplished. And we went through the interview process, and I was probably just sweating through my shirt. I had a coat and tie on, and at the end he said, I'm gonna go against what I've done up to this point, and I'm going to allow you in. And he said, but if you don't come more prepared than every senior in that class every single Wednesday night when we meet, then don't make me. He said, don't make me regret this decision. Okay. And I said, yes, sir. And he really taught me the power of executive briefings because at the beginning of every class, we'd have to report on certain assignments that we were given, and often it was about different parts of the world. He had a foreign policy class that I took as well, and then his best class, my senior year, was leadership and ethics. But so you'd get up in front of your classmates and you'd have to give a 60 to 90 second brief on your area of responsibility in the world and what was going on and what the implications were for the United States and second and third order effects, and start understanding that at that age. So
oh my gosh.
It was great. And
as a sophomore?
Oh yeah, as a sophomore.
Oh my God, no way.
I'd usually start having anxiety about Sunday night.
I'm
to get
having
prepared.
anxiety right now.
And,
I get a little nervous just you talking about it.
But I wish I had a General Sam in my life. That would have
been. But the
been...
leadership lesson there is, man, as leaders, we really should be able to encapsulate what we want to discuss in 60 60 to 90 seconds.
Absolutely.
I meant to our team. And so how often do I go to
Second
speak
and
to
third
my
order
team?
of consequences too, man.
To
Thinking
yeah.
strategically like that as I was a knucklehead as a sophomore, man.
Well, I mean, I had kids, so it was.
And let's not be mistaken. I was a knucklehead. I was still a knucklehead. I was just trying to dial it in when I needed to.
Yeah.
But the other side to General Sam, because while that's intense, but what I love about him was he knew how to drive fierce accountability into anybody, but it came from a place of love and connection first. And so he connected with all of us. And that's why so many people from that community and really across the world love this man that knew him and that worked with him, because one of the most humble leaders I've ever witnessed. General Sam, when he got back from World War II, his town of Rice, Virginia, which is right there near Farmville, was going to have a big hometown parade because that was the hometown hero that had returned from the war. And he was going, and I share this story with groups all the time, and he was going on a date that night, and he was up in his room brushing his hair, tying his shoes, and his dad walked upstairs, and he said he always remembered when his dad said Sammy, he knew to lock eyes with his father, and he came in there and he said Sammy, and he stopped what he was doing. He looked at his father. He said, "Yes, sir," and he said, "Sit down for a second, son." So he sat on the edge of his bed, and his dad said, "Son, we are immensely proud of you, and we thank God that you came home when so many others perished." And he said, "And you have a remarkable future ahead of you." He said, "But I want you to remember this one thing." And he said, "When you think you're green, you will continue to grow. But when you think you're ripe, you've already begun to rot." And he said it just resonated with him, and it was a message he carried for the rest of his life about humility and about having a growth mindset, because the journey never ends until we're in the box and we're joining the man upstairs. And so all his accolades and everything he accomplished, going to speak 6, 7 languages and having multiple degrees, being the first in his family to go to college, all those things were just a sense of his level of mastery and his quest for what was next, but also being able to impact others along the way. And so it's a message that I really hold tightly, because to honor him and to honor his legacy. But I think it's so important because we get caught up in the craze of, whatever you define success as or what society is trying to tell you, and you can just get so sucked into all that if you don't take a step back and realize what that means about the minute that we're ripe, we've already begun to rot because we get a big head, or we get complacent, or we do stupid things, we make poor choices, then that's counter to the whole reason we started on this journey in the first place. And so that always resonated with me as one of the most profound messages that he shared. Because he did live his life that way. And so everything he told me before he passed away at the age of 93, he got malaria in the jungles of Burma back when he was one of Merrill's marauders. I mean, that's another whole story.
Oh,
I mean,
my gosh,
they did a movie of him, back in General Merrill's guise. He was running the reconnaissance and scout platoon behind Japanese lines in Burma, and had a horse, Pride and Joy, that he'd ride through the jungles. I mean, just amazing.
Cow.
You can't make this stuff up with everything that he accomplished, but he just said that was the way he lived his life, and we saw that on campus with everybody. And he told me before he passed that he learned more from our generation than he ever did from his own, because we taught him. That was when technology was really starting to, as y'all recall, 2001. It was it was out, but we didn't have cell phones in college at that point. There was no cell tower in Farmville, and so he wanted to learn and be on that curve, even when he was in the fourth quarter of his life. But he knew that he had more that he could offer if he could adapt. And so that side of leadership, too, was just, I look back on, I mean, there's so many messages that you could pull out from that. But I was very appreciative of what he taught me, and forever grateful that I stayed there to absorb as much as I could from an individual like that. And the people he brought out to his farm, he'd have generals, he'd have princes from overseas, he'd have diplomats, and he'd invite us out every time to come have dinner with these people. And I was too young and dumb at the time to realize just the magnitude of who I was sitting at the dinner table with, and probably thinking about, I need to get back to campus so I can go to that social party or whatever it is tonight. And I'm sitting here getting to have dinner with, some of the Pete Schumacher, one of the first guys that went into Delta as an officer, and ends up being Chief of Staff of the Army. I mean, just people like that he exposed me to. Joe Galloway, who wrote the book We Were Soldiers Once and Young, and shared the story about Rick Rescorla. And
Great book. They also made a movie. Mel Gibson.
Yeah, Mel Gibson movie.
You would know.
I know the movie.
Yeah. And
Great
so all
book.
those, great book. And Joe Galloway was a character. We lost him, I believe, a couple years ago. But Joe shared, and kind of on the heels of 9/11, he shared the story about Rick Rescorla, who was a British expat that served in Vietnam, and that's where their relationship came from. Joe, when he was a wartime reporter, and just the valor that Rick Rescorla displayed on the battlefield and in the Battle of Ia Drang, and just bouncing from foxhole to foxhole, singing old, I believe it was Scottish songs to boost the morale of the men. And he was working as a head of security for, I believe it was Morgan Stanley. When the 93 World Trade Center bombing happened.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, what they came to do is not over, and they're going to try to do this again. And so he would make the employees, all 5,000 employees in the World Trade Center building, do rehearsals, and they called it Crazy Rick's fire drills because they get so mad that he was disrupting their day of being able to do their work, and he'd make them evacuate the building. And sure enough, on 9/11, he was there with a bullhorn and a calming presence, getting all of those employees out of the building on 9/11. And so Joe was the first one that introduced me to that story because of how close he was with Rick. But they got almost every single employee, I think, except a few, out on 9/11, and Rick went back in to try to go help others, and that's when the towers collapsed. And so, you just pick up these stories about people, and it just gives me an incredible source of inspiration and strength, because we're all capable of these things. You just have to continue to put one foot in front of the other and challenge yourself to give everything that you got to be that. And General Sam put that on a lot of us. And so that's what sent me, and I know I've kind of dovetailed, that's what sent me into the military is I stayed at Hampton-Sydney, started interviewing a lot of guys that had graduated before me that were in the service to really narrow in on what did I want to do. Did I want to go into the Marine Corps?
That's my big question.
Yeah. And so, I talked to a lot of guys and very remarkable stories, and humbled by it.
If I got to meet some Delta guys, I'm probably going there, man.
Yeah, oh yeah, and I mean, well, shoot, I had an amazing commander that went over there, and I joke with him. I went and visited him recently, and told him he ruined me because I held him on such a pedestal that any other officer that I was under command of, I was like, well, you're no so and so, you know, because I always thought so highly of him, and there were some other great ones too, but so as I went through that process, and I'm sure it was some of the fact that General Sam was in the Army versus in the Navy or the Marine Corps, or Coast Guard, or Air Force. But I was about to have LASIK surgery, so I knew that I probably wasn't going to be fit to be a pilot. And I wanted to be on the ground. I wanted, especially after 9/11, I wanted to go over there and lead men in combat. And so I kind of narrowed it down to really the Marine Corps and the Army. I liked what the Army had to offer with the schooling to go advance, to jump out of airplanes, to go to Ranger School, all that stuff. And I found a few guys that really I connected with and were great mentors. I mean, it's so important. And I think one message I'd share with the audience is when you have the opportunity to mentor others and to impart any part of your story upon them that can help them in their own decision making, it's how we pay it forward. And I think it's so important because I had so many people that poured into me. And so if I can do that for anybody, that's what I want to do. I talk to a lot of guys that are considering going in the service out of high school, or guys that are in college, and I'll always make time for those calls. And so that's what sent me into the Army. I went out, graduated in 2004. I knew I was going to go in. I had a lot of paperwork. I'd had shoulder surgery from football and had LASIK surgery, so I had all these waivers. And, remember how that goes, Sid, with the military. It's such a slow and just arduous process. And a gajillion waivers and later. And so I went out west and I worked at a ranch out there that summer and had a great experience.
God, that sounds awesome too.
It was like, I considered it my training grounds.
Holy
I said,
cow.
I'm going to go out here in encampment, Wyoming, and I'm going to run we were on a dirt road 8 miles off the highway, and that was going to be my running route. And we had a little barn that had a pull-up bar and, some free weights. And so that was going to be my gym. And then fly fishing and hiking up the mountains and doing all that stuff would be how I'd get in shape to prepare. And I probably over-prepared because I came back, I ended up at basic training in 2005 in March, and I was so disappointed. I got there and I was like, this is a joke. This is so easy. Why is it not harder?
It wasn't football two-a-days?
Yeah, it wasn't football two-a-days. It wasn't what that experience out west had been. And so I went through this period after I signed up to join where I had a little bit of regret. I was like, if this is what the military is all about, then I don't know if it's cut out for me. I started listening to that negative self-talk and instead of seeing where's the journey going to take you. And one of my blind spots is my impatience, and I need good people around me to be like, hey, just check yourself. You're trying to do too much too quickly.
It's good to recognize that.
Yes, it is. And so I met some really good guys that I gravitated to, and we kind of formed our little standards of how when we had free time we were going to do extra physical fitness or whatever else. And I went into a program called 09 Sierra. So you graduate basic training, then you have the opportunity to go to the officer candidate school at Fort Benning, Georgia. And so we all graduated, and the group that had come right off the streets, civilian to officer route, is the last route you can go to become an officer, a commissioned officer, because you either go to one of the academies, you do ROTC, or if you're already in service, active, and you get your degree, you can do green to gold. So you can go from non-commissioned officer to commission. So this is that last route. So we went, because we had college degrees behind us, so we went to basic, and then we went to the officer candidate school, and that was a great experience. I met some incredibly strong non-commissioned officers that were converting over to become officers, and so some of them took us under their wing, and Johnny Craver, who I shared with you before, Sid, was like a General Sam of my generation, and he was a Ranger instructor, and so Johnny took some of us in and taught us tactics, taught us about I wanted to be an infantry officer. I'd not been branch assigned yet, and Johnny was a former 11 Bravo, an infantryman, and so he took us in and he showed us how to lay in the perfect ambush, how to do special reconnaissance patrols, how to do land navigation, because that's a skill set that humbles any of us. Absolutely. I always laugh because if you want a dose of humility, go do a land nav course. You'll find your first 2 points, start getting cocky, be like, I got this, and then the next thing you know, on the way to your third point, you're lost in the middle of backwoods Georgia, and all you hear is the birds or the crickets or the
hopefully
bullfrogs.
Not banjos.
I have a
no banjos.
I have a
Exactly.
snowmobile story just like that. So my first time in Alaska,
Snowmobile.
I'm from Alabama and grew up in the woods. And they asked me, they were like, "Can you navigate?" I was like, "Yeah, I can navigate." They said, "You want to ride the snowmobile?" I was like, "You need anybody to go with you?" I was like, "No, I can get back." I literally had to find a neighborhood, call them and say, I had to ride out of the woods to the neighborhood. Navigating the snow is a whole different thing.
It is. It's tough.
And so I know that navigation stuff.
Dead
I found
reckoning.
out that day I was not good at all.
Anytime I thought I was good, the next time I went back out, I'd find myself really just doing some deep searching, inside and saying, what am I doing here? I got buddies that are all over doing different things. And
I should be better than this.
Yeah, I'm sitting here just sweating, pulling ticks off of me in the middle of the woods.
Yeah,
and
good times.
So anyway, he was amazing, and he set a lot of us up for success to become good young officers in the United States Army, and I went on to the infantry officer course with him after we graduated from OCS.
What do they call that?
IOBC.
IOBC.
So
The first one's the basic school?
Basic, you go to basic training, then you go to OCS, the officer candidate
OCS.
school, and then you go to your branch designated specialty. So I was an 11 Alpha is what I got assigned, which is what I wanted as an infantry officer. So I went to IOBC. It's a week in the classroom. and then a week in the field. So you go learn, and then you go apply application of learning. So everything from all our different battle drills to how you run a patrol base to how you coordinate with adjacent units and set into positions, all those things. And so that was a lot of fun because we had our weekends off, and so we got to go to football games and we got to really build deep relationships with those guys that were all going to be going to live lives of consequence, because all of them were going to be going overseas at some point to fight in one of our wars. And after that school, I did Ranger School, and that was a big leadership test because it's 60.
How long is Ranger School?
It's 60. I think it's 62 days.
How much weight did you lose?
I lost 37 pounds.
Oh my God!
Oh my God! What weight did you go in
I was in at 193, somewhere around there, and came back and was emaciated, smelled like ammonia. I mean, just, a total, your cheeks are sunken in. And
explain to Keith what that is. Like how
Ranger
School is crazy, man.
It's a tough one. It's there's multiple phases. It starts out with the first week is where they really indoctrinate you, and your body goes into total shock because you're not getting any sleep. You're not eating a lot. You're doing basic individual skills, and they're assessing you on it. And if you fail any of those, then they kick you out. They oversubscribe Ranger School every class, so the first day puts such anxiety on the Ranger students that they can't do the easiest things because of self-induced stress. So they may have 350 show up at 3:30 in the morning, and you do a PT test, a physical fitness test, that everybody's done 1,000 times, and then the only difference is the Ranger instructors are wanting to see the top of your chest plate buried in the dirt to count one push-up. And so if you got to do 2 minutes, you got to do 60 push-ups. They're the hardest 60 push-ups you've ever done because you'll get into a rhythm, and you'll get to like 15, and they'll say 15, 15, 15, 15. And so you start playing mind games like, oh my God, is he going to count the next one? And you try to ask him what you're doing wrong, and they're not going to tell you. So you start going slower, and it's almost like a pendulum where you've got to do it. And so sometimes people, they get muscle failure and they burn out, or sometimes they just don't finish in the allocated time. And so you're down almost 35-40% that first day. And then it continues to dwindle from there. And after the first week, you stay at binning for the binning phase, and that's where they teach you squad level tactics. And then you go to the mountain phase, which is up in Dahlonega, Georgia, in the Appalachian Mountains, and they teach you the mountain phase there. So mountaineering, how you do mountain warfare, which would prove to be invaluable when we're in places like Afghanistan fighting at 8,000 feet. And from that phase is tough because you don't realize how many calories you're burning, and you're not taking in nearly as many as you're burning. So you really got to play the long game and be smart with your energy and your just everything that you're doing, and also still be a good team player, because sometimes people will go get their go. Yeah. Their go is when they're being evaluated, and if they start coasting and it's Keith's turn to be in the leadership role, and you and I are on his team, and we're not doing the right thing, then he might get a no-go because of us. Yeah. And so you learn a lot about people. Adversity reveals character, as we've heard, and that is at the heightened most of the sense of that. And after that, you go to the swamp phase, which is down in Florida. And you're in the rivers and the swamps, and you're doing beach assaults and zodiacs, and if you finish all that, then you go back to Fort Benning and graduate. So it's a heck of a school. People from all branches of service come to it. You'll have Navy SEALs there. You'll have Air Force combat controllers there. But what I loved about Ranger School, speaking on the vein of being a good teammate, is every phase you do peer evaluations. And I talked to a good friend of mine that I used to work with on a daily basis, and when I first got out of service, and when I went to work with Nathan, and I said, what if we did some of these things? And he just started laughing. He's like, Brad, half the people would quit. We can't go run them through the woods to see who's really got it, and we can't do this. And I was like, well, I mean, maybe we could.
Maybe we need to.
Yeah, but the other side to it was the peer evaluations. And so the closest thing that we're all familiar with in the private sector is doing 360s.
360 reviews, yeah.
And the peer evaluation, what's different about that one is not only are you getting that type of 360 feedback, but if the three of us are on a 15-man element and we all have to force rank one another, you have to rank somebody number 1 and you have to rank somebody number 15. Or, excuse me, you're not ranking yourself, so 14. So you start to have pattern recognition, because if one of us is not doing the right thing and the majority of us put that individual is the last, he's going to get kicked out of the course. And so it really, really drives in that sense of carry your weight and always be looking for what you can do to help others.
Yeah.
Because it's not about you. It's about that team. It's about that organization. And so that's what I loved about Ranger School, is it forces that function that then is really difficult when you get to a unit, and not everybody has been through Ranger School. They don't understand that to that level. And so I graduated Ranger School in 2006. I went to Airborne School, and while I was at Airborne School, I got the opportunity to do a branch swap, assignment swap. I was supposed to be going to Korea. I didn't want to go to Korea. I'd just be sitting on the DMZ, probably getting fat, watching that, that play out. I wanted to go serve overseas in combat, and the valedictorian of West Point had flunked out of Ranger School, never to return. And if you're the valedictorian of West Point, you get number 1 duty assignment choice. And so this guy had chosen Vicenza, Italy, which was one of the premier units in the conventional army, the 173rd Airborne Brigade Combat Team. And he couldn't go to Italy if he wasn't Ranger qualified. So I got to do a 1-for-1 swap with him, and he went to Korea, and I got to go to Italy, which I would have never in a million years had the opportunity to do. And I'll pause there for a second, because
I was going to say, how did you get that?
So this is what's crazy about that story. I didn't share, and it's a long story, and I recycled because of land navigation, and it was all my fault. And I own that 100%. I did not own it at the time. I played victim and woe is me, and throw every excuse and whiny story you want out there.
I've probably been there this week. Yeah.
And so I got recycled because of bad choices that I made on land navigation, using my flashlight without being covered up.
Yeah.
And I got kicked back to day 1, and I thought about dropping out. And Johnny Craver showed up while I was out there, because he called out to check on, see who had recycled, because he was a former instructor. He knew all those guys. And when he heard it was my name, he was surprised. He said, I figured a lot of y'all would recycle, but I didn't think you'd be the first one, and damn sure not in the first phase. And I said, thanks, Johnny. And, he made fun of me, because that's what he did. And he talked me out of quitting. And I owe an enormous debt of gratitude to Johnny, because I was at my lowest point. I was embarrassed, ashamed, playing the pity party, being the victim,
and
listening
to
negative self-talk.
all this crap all over again.
And all my friends had gone forward to the next phase, and think of every self-justification BS you could come up with. That's what I was singing. And
How
Johnny,
often do we do that, though?
all the damn time.
We're still in Ranger School, though.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, the easy thing is with society is, and this was a mantra I took on there, was. And because he hit me right between the eyes. He said, Brad, there's guys with tabs, meaning the Ranger tab that you get to wear on your shoulder, which is your credibility badge when you show up to a combat unit, that your men knew you're willing to walk the walk. You're not just going to stand there with your hands on your hips and say, are these my men? And so he wanted to make sure I understood that. He said, there's guys with tabs and there's guys with stories. And the stories are the excuses that they gave on why they didn't finish.
That's freaking powerful.
And he said, I watched it so many times. As an instructor, I watched the people play the violin. And he's like, they would go on and have really, really difficult times facing the truths of what really occurred that day or at that moment, because of the weakness that crept in.
Oof.
And so he gave me that. And, and we lost Johnny. That was the last, when Johnny came to see me, that was the last time I ever got to see Johnny Craver. He was killed in Iraq leading his men in combat. And, he was, I share with folks because it's probably good for my own healing when I think about him, but I only knew Johnny for less than a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that wild when you stop and think about the profound impact that he had on me, like General Sam, because of his willingness to pour into us. And the mantra I was going to share was what he didn't say this verbatim, but this is what I took away from it, and I know I read it somewhere, but it was all about the discipline and the sacrifice over the ease of the indulgence. And when you were saying that, Keith, about don't we do that every day? Absolutely, because we're surrounded by all the disruptions of indulgence, because if I quit this or I go focus over here, I don't have to face the truth of what I'm walking away from, because there's so many other distractions or things that I can pick up and start running with. And that just hit me between the eyes of my truth at that time was, if I wanted to do this, then I needed to commit to it and go do it, and not do it half-heartedly. And when times got tough, I was going to bolt and go say, well, I got screwed by a ranger instructor or whatever else. And so that was, for Johnny's legacy, that's what I really honor him for, is that I try to live my life recognizing that, because it isn't every day isn't going to be easy, and we're going to have adversity, and we're going to have difficulty, and we're going to have tragedy, and that's part of our own stories, and we've got to think about where we can find the strength. And a lot of times it's based off of the people we know that have been through a lot, or that we want to honor. And I wear this bracelet to honor Johnny and others that we lost. That's my personal accountability for what I need to do to continue to live, since they're not here. And so that all that stuff really means a lot to me. And if I had not recycled Ranger School, I would have never met my Ranger buddy, who had also recycled because he had rolled his ankle. He was a collegiate wrestler at West Point, old guy, and big old stud from New York. And we used to call each other brethren, because anytime I saw somebody from West Point that wasn't pulling their weight in Ranger School, I'd be like, there's your brethren over there. And he'd be like, shut up, and he'd get all mad. And he called me when we had finished Ranger School and I was an airborne. And he said, hey, do you want to go to Italy? And I was like, Rob, if you're messing with me, I was like, I'm going to bring a bat down to the courtyard and take out your kneecaps. I was like, that's not cool, man. And he's like, no, I got a classmate that has Italy, and he wants to go to Korea. And you have Korea, and y'all could call branch and do a 1-for-1 swap right here, right now. And I said, good Lord. I said, I'm coming down. I didn't have my boots on. I just ran down there. And we got on the phone right there in the courtyard, called up to Alexandria, Virginia, and got Branch on the phone and gave him our social security numbers. And the next thing you know, I'm headed to Italy to join one of the best units in the United States Army. And he was headed to Korea, and it changed the trajectory of my experience in the military. Wow. And so there's that great Kevin Elko quote about things don't happen to us, they happen for us. And I would add to it that I was too blind, naive, and sorrowful of self at the time to realize what had happened for me by recycling is that I met my future Ranger buddy who made that connection, who then afforded me the opportunity to end up in one of the best units and have one of the best experiences in my military career, which was going and joining that unit to go deploy with them. So that's a mouthful right there.
Awesome.
So many times, if I look at the stumbles of my own life, like where I've played the victim so many times, and sitting where I sit now, I look at it and say, man, that was so for me.
Yeah.
That stumble was like God saying, hey, recycle right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
one of my favorite books, man,
yeah.
is The Obstacle is the Way.
Yeah,
it really does
yeah.
just say, man,
Ryan
like all
Holiday,
those bad things, that happened, you wouldn't take them away now.
Right.
That's awesome.
It's hard. It's hard at the time to recognize.
It is hard. It's hard. And, and God, what were you, 23, 22?
I was 22. Yeah.
That's tough to have that level of maturity to not, and thank God we didn't have social media.
No kidding.
We grew up with no social media, no comparison, and no one. I don't know what they call that, where they're like looking cool all the time. Keith would probably know. He's the social media guy. But I think that gets into young people's heads. Like if they do fail, if they do mess up, they see everyone else on social media looking perfect all the time, and man, it's tough to take.
Yeah.
The generation today has the highest level of comparison depression in history.
They should go do more tough things, like go out west and work on a ranch.
But I think a lot
with
of
no social media.
I think a lot of this culture too is going back to what you said about when people do make a mistake, they say, "Oh, I can just quit and go over here."
Yeah,
I can just.
Yeah.
We have so much opportunity right now to go just do new stuff, and I think the workforce right now, because you can get a job anywhere, there's so many people just scattering from what they're supposed to do just because they may have stumbled there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and maybe they don't have enough General Sams in their lives either, though.
Yeah.
There's not many of those guys. That's pretty awesome. So we kind of stopped there briefly,
Yeah.
but I know that's not the end of the story.
Yeah.
You get to Italy, you go serve a little. You
So
go do that.
I end up over there. I go to Charlie Company, and I get my opportunity to take a platoon. Didn't know a soul. It's similar to when I went and studied abroad. I did know one guy when I went to go study abroad. But end up over in Italy, and that's another great experience, and something I hope my children will have the courage to go do. But when you're out there all alone, and it forces you so far out of your comfort zone to go meet new people, to go prove yourself, to go do all those things. It's so darn good for you, and it's so enriching and fulfilling. And then you meet awesome people everywhere, and
you're forced out of your comfort zone.
Oh my God, it was.
And there's no growth in the comfort zone, right?
That's right. That's right. I mean, that's we got to continue to bounce out of that, and some of the people I met over there were truly remarkable. And one of my commanders I shared earlier, he had a big. There's these people that I think that God puts in our life too that. Oftentimes they see something in us that we don't see in ourselves yet. And I'll never forget what he said. We were training up for the EIB, which is the Expert Infantryman's Badge, and they send you through all these competencies, and you've got to pass with a certain standard and a certain time allocation with a very specific measurement of how you do it, from assembling and disassembling all of our weapon systems to calling for fire with field artillery and being able to narrow in on the target to doing some physical test as well, and so one of them, the kickoff, was you're going to do a 12-mile road march, and he called the officers, he called his platoon leaders into his office the day before, and I just remember he looked at all of us, and then he kind of locked eyes with me, and he said, "One of you is going to go out and come in first place in the entire battalion. Do not let me down." And I went home back to my little apartment. I was single at the time, living by myself. I went back to my apartment. I was like,
in Italy,
in Vicenza, Italy. And I was like, God, I think he was talking to me. I got a knot in my stomach. I don't know if I can do this, And so I just got out there the next morning. I ran the whole damn thing with my, 45, 50-pound rucksack on my back, and finished first in the battalion on that training exercise, and kind of conditioned me with when we can break the barriers in our mind and our mindset, we can put our bodies through extraordinary things. And I learned that in Ranger School, and then it was doubled down with when people around you that want to push you because they know what you're capable of really do that too. And that's what this commander did for me. And from Italy, we go on to train up for Afghanistan. We'd spend our time in Germany training. While I was in Germany on one of those training exercises is when I learned about Johnny's death, and that rocked me really hard. I remember that was probably what the most sobering moment of reflection for me of what I'd signed up to do, and recognize that even a guy like Johnny, who was this just extraordinary, just man's man, tough, gruff,
bigger
chiseled,
than life,
grizzled dude, just jacked, Ranger instructor, could bite your head off. We lost what our version of this warrior was, and so that made me really put this sense of purpose on while we were in Germany and we were training up. We got to get after it because it could happen to any of us, and we can't take anything for granted. And so we had some adversity in Germany. I had to get rid of my platoon sergeant, which is not easy as a platoon leader. You're the junior, even though you're the officer in charge.
Yeah,
the platoon sergeant really runs the show because he's got all the experience.
Yeah.
And as you know, and so that was a tough decision, and it was one of those things that I witnessed what his leadership style was, or lack thereof, for the guys.
When did you know?
I knew after. So we were doing forced road marches between ranges. We were going to cover 100 miles in a short amount of time. So we were going 12 to 15 miles a day with all of our equipment, moving through the woods, going from range to range, working on different marksmanship skills.
Okay.
And he was always driving the Humvee. With all of our additional ammunition and some of our guys that were busted ankles or swollen knees. And I remember asking him one time, and we'll just call him Sergeant P. I said, Sergeant P, why don't you come out here and join us on this next forced march? And he kind of ridiculed me and condescending remark. He's like, well, sir, you obviously don't understand. The platoon sergeant's responsible for the beans, bullets, and Band-Aids, and we got to get things where they need to be, and I'll see you there. And so then I'd be out and we'd be doing individual movement techniques and bounding through different ranges with live fire exercises. and he'd be back smoking a cigarette in the rear, not out watching and assessing our guys and giving them feedback and coaching. And I'm sitting there running alongside them, telling them, hey, make sure your muzzle's doing this. Here's your field of fire. There's the enemy. Make sure you're engaging. Just helping them with our standards. And so it was quick. It was within the first week of do as I say, not as I do, that it was counter. It really violated my values and counter to what I wanted to see this platoon be. And I could sense it in the morale. The morale was low in that platoon. And I had some studs. To the point that I'm so proud to be able to say that one of those squad leaders is now the command sergeant major of that very unit today.
Oh, dang.
So the gems were there.
Yeah.
The leadership was lacking. And so we got rid of him, and obviously I'm still processing Johnny's loss. Now I don't have a platoon sergeant right now. We get back, and I'm blessed with a former Mountain Phase Ranger instructor.
Okay.
That's going to be my new platoon sergeant to go with us to Afghanistan, and he was amazing. He was tough as woodpecker lips, and just had the just had the mindset of what it meant to have the warrior's edge and the warrior spirit, and was highly disciplined and just great. And he was married to the military. I mean, he was committed like nothing you've ever seen before. So I was truly blessed with that, and went through that kind of valley of adversity, and we came out so much stronger, and took that unit over to eastern Afghanistan, and we got all those men adopted by families back home, and we turned that unit around to be the best in the battalion, and immensely proud of what they bought into and what they were able to accomplish in very hostile, remote areas of Afghanistan, in the mountains right on the Pakistan border, and just the courage under fire, the deep connections in those relationships. We never lost anybody by the grace of God, and probably a ton of prayers back home. We had, probably one of the more frightening U-shaped ambushes we found ourselves in the valley floor, and had one of our gunners get wounded. And once we popped out of the vehicles and started climbing the mountains, that's when the enemy scatters. But when they can count you in vehicles and they can see 6 Humvees, and what they tried to do was lock us into the kill zone and blow up our lead and trail vehicle with RPGs so that they could just annihilate the rest of us. And luckily we were able to push through the kill zone, and then we dismounted and started taking the fight to them, and had close air support come on station and start dropping big JDAM bombs, and that'll rattle your chest cavity, and it also brings a lot of confidence to a fight when you can stack the odds in your favor. But remarkable group, remarkable heroes and stories and just experiences. I mean, these guys came from all walks of life. They didn't have the upbringing that I had. Some of them grew up in violent households. Some of them grew up in broken households. Some of them didn't have a household to grow up in. And so, just really grateful to have that experience, to want to love on others and be able to help make them better, and not everybody's going to buy into that. Just like at a company, not everybody's going to buy into it. But the ones that do, they can go on to lead remarkable lives. And that's like I share all the time. I mean, my proudest is learning what these guys are doing now and getting to play even a small, seemingly insignificant role in somewhere along their journey where we're able to teach them about connection and about relationships. And that's what matters to me. I mean, I love that side of leadership, is just building relationships, having the curiosity about learning on others, and how you can meet them, and how you can meet them where they are, and help them to whatever their objectives are. And so I got to lead that platoon, and then I got voluntold to go take another platoon. Didn't want to leave my current one, but the colonel called and he said I had to fire a platoon leader in a different area for doing something stupid, and we need to turn around this organization, and you're my guy. And I said, well, sir, with all due respect, I really enjoy where I am, and I know the battle space, and we've built rapport with all the locals, and I really don't want it. And he said, that's great, Brad. Have your bags packed. You'll get picked up this afternoon on a Black Hawk. So I had to leave my guys and go start all over in combat with a different group. And that was a remarkable experience. I ended up talking about that one I did a TED Talk about how abundance can ignite compassion, and that was the message, because this was a broken group of men that really didn't have that leadership and that experience of what it meant to start to get to know each other and be there for one another and fight alongside one another. And we turned them around, and they were remarkable. They were a remarkable bunch. And I finished out that very, very long deployment, 16 months, with a scout reconnaissance platoon. So I had 5 sniper teams.
Oh,
and
man.
we got to kind of go in before the rest of the main element would come and set up. And then
Those are legit dudes.
very legit. That group was, I mean, I wasn't on autopilot, but most of them were Ranger qualified. They were cream of the crop. They had also been over there for 12 months, 13 months already fighting, and seasoned individuals.
Sniper school.
Yeah, incredible leaders. So that was a great experience. And then I got back to Italy, and we lost all those guys to promotions and schools and whatever was next, PCS, moving assignments. So I had to rebuild the sniper platoon, and that was my commitment to the colonel, the incoming colonel, who's now a 2-star general, a remarkable leader, Matt McFarland, before I left, because while we were deployed, got to work with Green Berets, and that's what really excited me about wanting to go try out for Special Forces. And so I left Italy with the intent to go be a Green Beret. And but one of my things before I left was to help them create a scout platoon selection, a mini selection. I'd just gone to Green Beret Special Forces Assessment Selection course. So I came back with some stolen ideas from them.
Sure.
And we kind of ran a mini course out in the mountains of northern Italy to find the next group of snipers and help get them prepped for what would be inevitable, another combat deployment. And then I left and headed back to the States. And I've been talking a lot. Do y'all want to jump in with anything?
No,
This
man.
is good
This is
stuff.
fantastic.
And there's so many leadership principles
I'm
within
just taking
inside of
notes
all
over
this,
here
man.
and crushing it on the note side. But, well, okay, so number one, for the audience and for Keith, the Green Beret mission is what? This is pretty interesting. This is cool. Because I don't think many people understand this.
You know, I mean, it's really about the unconventional warfare of by, with, and through indigenous populations. So we are the ones that want to be behind the scenes, working an underground type of operation where you build up the masses so that they can either overthrow a government, or they can, you know, if it's some kind of dictatorship, or they can have, they can create their own militia or military. So our number one mission set is unconventional warfare. We also do special reconnaissance. We do direct action. We do foreign internal defense. So there's a lot that goes off of that. But I'd say the footprint for Green Berets is you have to be bought in to understanding how to build the most trusting relationships in the world, because some of these military leaders go on to become the leaders of these nations that we work with. And so
If
those
this isn't
connections,
like the best like prep for big leadership, you know, and organization building, I don't know what is. Like, this is the best, and I didn't know this till later on in life, but it's fantastic. Their mission is fantastic. Like, it really is. It's the hearts and minds, you know.
It is, absolutely. And so, I mean, that's what we did in Afghanistan. That's what we did Central and South America, and you know, and that's what Green Berets do all over the world. Every group is assigned a different area of responsibility in the world, similar to what General Sam was teaching us back in the day, and hint where the doctrine came from. He was one of the fathers of the doctrine. So the groups have assignments, and you learn the language, and you become cultural experts, and you want to blend in with the population. So there's a great mentor that I had that helped teach us about village stability operations, which was one of the missions we were going to be doing in Afghanistan later on a deployment. And Scott Mann has a great saying that he would always impart upon us, and it was that we build relationships because our lives depend on it. And the way that you leverage that in the business world or in the private sector is all of us now, we build relationships because our livelihood depends on it. So for us, it was because our lives truly depended on it. If I'm living in a village in Afghanistan and I can't build a trusting, credible relationship with the tribal elders, then the next time we go out from where we're sleeping, there's going to be a bomb waiting on us. Somebody's going to step on it. Or there's going to be an ambush around that corner. Or the enemy is going to have information about us because of what the locals are sharing.
Yeah.
And if I build that relationship, now I have the advantage because I can alienate and isolate the enemy. And all the while, we're getting a foothold in that village, and it's helping humanize my men because, I mean, what they're asked to do is violence of action to the umpteenth degree. I mean, you got to go from being able to kick a soccer ball with a kid and teach a hygiene class on how to brush your teeth to hop on a helicopter and go kick a door in and go find the bad guys. And so the switch that you have to have is uncommon, and we're capable of having it, but anytime you can continue to keep them grounded in humanity is important, because these are also fathers and husbands and members of a community, and they will exit the military at some point, and they need to integrate back into society. And so all those things are important life lessons that they need to understand. And so it was a great mission. It was fascinating to get to experience that, and you get to work with a lot of different agencies in the U.S. government. You get a lot of toys, you get a lot of resources, and you get to do some really cool things. And what I respected about them before I became one was the autonomy that they had. You know, we'd have this big unit moving into an area, and you'd come across these dudes in local attire, and you'd be like, "Geez, those are freaking Americans over there, and it's Green Berets living in this village amongst the locals with nothing."
Eating their food.
Oh yeah, eating their food, and it's probably why I've got so many health issues now. But
I don't know about that.
But yeah, I mean, but you follow their, yeah, exactly. You follow their customs, and you learn a lot about just their way of life. And I'll tell you what, Afghans, they understand what it means to be a survivor to the Darwinian of senses.
I mean, they do. They've been constant wars, man.
Constant
from Russia
wars, and they don't know where their next
that.
meal is going to come from. And you know, and the men, they grow beards, and that's a sign of entering, you know, the wise years. And if you have a gray beard, a white beard, it's a sign of you've survived to this point, and so you are automatically respected, because not everybody does.
Sid, you'd awesome. Be in that.
Don't be throwing stones over there.
Exactly.
You'd be in the wise years.
The wise elders. And so that mission was incredible. And we lived in a village in northern Kandahar, and really did a phenomenal job. The guys did an incredible job with getting into that village where one of the biggest bomb makers in Kandahar was from, and establishing a foothold and building those relationships by, with, and through to where that village stood up and decided they wanted to defend themselves. And so we armed them, and we gave them weapons, we gave them training, and we were all alongside them.
Pretty sure there's a movie about that one too.
There's a lot of there's a lot of different stories out there. And I mean, you know, that was at a time too, guys, where this was 2012, 2011, I guess. Yeah, 2011, 2012. That was when the green on blues were happening. That's where the Afghans were turning their weapons on the Americans. So you think about, we're about to hand an AK-47 to this local and trust him and hope that he's not going to turn that weapon on us when our back's against him. And you have to have absolute trust to be able to do that, because a lot of different units stopped doing it because of that and their worry. So we were very selective of the group that we wanted to fight alongside, and we had different ways to vet them. And you saw incredible valor and heroism in some of these Afghans that put their lives on the line for us. And I remember one time we had gotten a call from higher headquarters about a downed drone that had just crashed in the mountains. Obviously, there's sensitive equipment on that, and they wanted to recover it. We were the closest unit to it. It was in a bad area we called it the belly button, and it was kind of one way in, one way out, and you were going to make contact if you went there. And I was meeting that night with some of the locals, and when I got the call, and I turned to one of the locals here, John, and I said, "Would you be willing to go help us recover this sensitive equipment?" And he used to fight in the Mujahideen, and he could read a map, and I showed him exactly where it was on the map. And he had a motorcycle, and he reluctantly agreed to go do it. He left right then and there, and he went and he recovered it, and he came back trembling with fear, because he said people saw him and he's going to be killed and his family's going to be killed. And he did that for us. He did all that for us and for the trust in the relationship. And I promised him we'd protect him and his family, and he was one of the ones we ended up equipping and arming, because I knew that sense of trust was there because of what his commitment was and what he was willing to do. And so we tried to find the right ones. And then, just like what we all notice, good people know good people. And that's how we recruit in our businesses, and that's how we try to surround ourselves with people that are going to help us become better versions of ourselves. And so I relied on the Hirajans of the world to say, who else in this village is good people besides all your brothers and cousins and uncles? Because I know you're going to tell me them, but show me some of the other warriors. Where are the warriors, and what do they think about Tor John, the bomb maker? Are they on his side, or are they on your side? I don't want them to be on our side. I want them to be on your side. We're going to leave eventually, so they need to be committed to you, not to me. And so that's how we started to assess, and it was incredible to go through that with my guys and have an intelligence sergeant that every day he's putting on the enemy hat, telling me how he's going to kill me and what patterns we're setting and how we're falling victim to complacency like we can all do. And so what an experience. I mean, you look back on it compared to right now running kids to boys breakfast club on Friday mornings and getting them to football practice. It was two different lives for sure.
That's all right, man. That's pretty awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, everyone knows if you're a business owner, a business leader, or you're just a person in the world needing help with accounting, you need a real partner. You need someone that's going to listen to you and not just plug numbers in to make their job easy to do your taxes. At least that's what I want. I've been through a lot of accountants in my life, and I have yet to find one even remotely as good as Johnny Baranko. He's the owner of Baranko and Associates, and he's the kind of guy that really doesn't manipulate your books to make his job easier. He really is trying to give you insights into your business or into your financial planning world. Whatever your goals are, he's there to help. And so I just encourage you to give him a call. Baranko and Associates, look him up online. It's barankoandassociates.com, and just see if he can help you. He really is the accountant that I recommend to everyone, even before he was a sponsor of the podcast. So please, if you need an accountant, just do yourself a favor and give him a call.
Hey guys, this is Keith. Let me break down a scenario for you. Are you a business owner that is overwhelmed by the options of investing, but you're being told you need to invest in retirement, you need to invest in mutual funds, you need to buy some single stocks? Well, I have your fix. C2 Wealth Strategies, ran by our friend Wes Cody. Their website is c2wealth.com. If you are looking at investing at all and are confused by it, give them a call today. They will be happy to handle whatever you need. He's brought up very specific things that I need to be working on as a business owner in my investing life. Let him do that same thing for you. c2wealth.com, or go to the overlaplife.com page and click on sponsors. Gonna buy the one we need.
Okay. So, man, that's an incredible experience, and like I said before, I don't know that there's a better training ground for for leadership development and everything else. Just tell the audience, like, how do you go from that to kind of, and I know you now in this life, and I didn't know you then, which I kind of wish I would have known you then. I would have come along with you, man. That sounds like an awesome ride. But so how do you go from there to where you are now? Kind of bridge that gap for me.
Sure. So I got off active duty in 2014. I did stay with 20th Special Forces Group for a few more years, kind of ease that transition instead of going cold turkey. And that's a National Guard Special Forces unit. And, it was tough. It was really hard because you went from this really this regimented life of you knew your next 18 months always what was going to be going on. You may not know exactly where you were going, but you knew you were going somewhere.
It was planned out.
It was planned to, and really having that deep sense of purpose behind the mission and service to now I'm back in my hometown. I've got 2 young children and a pregnant wife.
So you met your wife in active duty?
I met my wife, and we long distance dated the entire time. We never lived in the same town. So she'd come to Italy and visit, which I know was really tough on her to have to come all the way over to Italy and travel all over.
That sounds bad.
But and I tell people too that what was amazing about that, because people are like, "How in the world did y'all do that?" It forces you to be an exceptional communicator. because you have to be intentional about how you communicate.
Holy
and I
cow.
think that's important
That's
for
a great one.
all of us to realize with the assumptions we can make in relationships,
Yeah.
not just with your spouse, but with your team, and that, oh, well, they should just get it because that's how I am or whatever. And it's like, well, they don't get it. And
Yeah.
so answering your question, I came back, I got into real estate, was not finding purposeful work for me. It was a great job. I did a couple different things in commercial real estate and did some real estate development, served as a director of development for a company before my good friend Nathan Cox, who I know y'all know, lives over here, called me. And Nathan,
That's actually how I got connected with you.
yeah, exactly. And Nathan had served, and Nathan and I played inside linebacker together back in the day. And we had been
UMS.
best friends, correct, best friends since kindergarten. And he said, hey, I'm blowing and going. He'd been out of the service a little bit longer than me. He had messed his knee up and had gotten out, I think, around 2008. And so he said, I'm blowing and going. I love people, but I also love chasing the next thing. And the deal, I can't do both. Would you come be my people guy, my human performance guy? Will you come help me make sure that the team is rowing in the right direction, we've got good alignment, and we're getting the very best of what people are capable out of them? And I said, Nathan, I don't know what the heck that looks like. And he said, yeah, you do. You've been doing it your whole, the whole military career. And we just need to figure out how to switch that over to the private sector. And I, when I was in real estate, I'd been getting asked to come give talks at different groups, and I would reluctantly say yes, and not to go share war stories, but to go share leadership vignettes.
Sure.
And so Nathan took that risk and brought me on, and we started that process, and we had a great mentor that Nathan was working with one-to-one, who was also working with the company when he had started or bought out his partners and started 68 Ventures. And so helped him grow that from what was, I think at the time, 3 or 4 companies to 17 companies, and keeping that, the mission, the vision, the values, the purpose, the way that we hire, our process, the way that we give feedback, all those things in front of them, how we use insights, a psychometric assessment tool to ground them in self-awareness so they know who they are, how they show up, what's the impact they can have on a good day, what's the impact they can have on a bad day, how does that affect not only their performance, but the performance of others? And then what do they need to learn and reflect on in order to achieve what's next? And so start that flywheel process of self-discovery and then ultimate accountability. And but do it from a place of the General Sam principles of start by building out those relationships, show people that you care, and they're going to care back. And then when you're giving them feedback, it doesn't have to be this defensive style of, oh, well, they don't like me or they're going to fire me. No, it's one thing I often
How do we take Sid's fieriness and hone it?
we have to get him up earlier and make him go run 20 miles every day before he shows
I ran
up.
5 this morning.
That's right. It's not enough. It needs to be 10.
Actually.
It needs to be 10.
10.
10? Okay. 10.
Yeah.
10,
He's like,
I'm
I'll
good
do
with
that.
it.
I'll do that
I'm good
starting
with 10.
tomorrow. Oh. But that was, something I share, and I think this is important for all of us to reflect on too. And I'm right in the knee deep in it with coaching 6th grade football with talk about moments of failure where I'm just looking in the mirror at the night saying, what in the world? I have got to do better. These poor kids, it's stuck with me.
Like a bunch of little puppies.
I mean, it's amazing. They're so impressionable. But think about this.
You leave there saying Iraq was easy.
I am 100%. 100%. I leave the games and I'm like, good Lord, I totally botched this one. And but what's interesting is think about what the age they are. So my oldest is in 6th grade, and I've got 3 boys, and I've got a 4th grader and a 2nd grader, and just I love watching them compete. I love watching them learn and grow. And you think about it, the ages they are right now, and I'll show you where I'm going. But right now, they've got their parents, they've got Anna, my wife, and I constantly on them, giving them feedback, coaching them, telling them this, telling them that, helping them, whatever it is.
Immediate feedback,
feedback
Right
in the
then,
moment,
in the
feedback
moment.
in the moment. Holding them accountable, right? Did you get your homework done? All right, well, we're getting up early tomorrow. Or when we have bad behavior and discipline, we like to do push-ups in our house, especially if we have negative self-talk. We're going to drop and get stronger if we're going to be negative. And so all those things we're doing. And who else is doing it? Their teachers are doing it.
Yeah.
Their coaches are doing it. Their community's doing it. They've got all this around them. And then all of a sudden, we start rising in the grades and we graduate. And for some that are fortunate enough to go to college, they get more of that in college. Others may enter the workforce right after high school. And then all of a sudden, it's like in society we stop doing it, and that it's not kosher to give feedback anymore, or it makes people uncomfortable. That journey should never end. It should go until, like General Sam said, I want to learn from everybody. And so I encourage people, ask for it. And if there's business owners and leaders that are listening to this, that should be one of the best mantras you're remembered for, is that my boss always asked me for feedback so he or she could calibrate how they were doing and where they needed to lean in more, maybe where they needed to back off some, because from a situational leadership style, where these people were now, even though they might have been brand new, wet behind the ears when they got here, now they have some conscious competence about them, or unconscious competencies about them. I don't need to micromanage them anymore. And I have failed to make the turn in my leadership style to back off and empower them, whatever it may be. But if we don't know, oftentimes people aren't going to have the courage just to come tell us. So giving that feedback is critical, and we do it all the way up through that. And the military is great at it. You know, you're a no-go. They tell you why you're a no-go. I mean, it's task condition standards. Here's where you failed to meet it. Here's what you need to go do better if you want to be a Green Beret.
Report,
it's right there on your report.
Written.
So the only thing you can do is go stare in that mirror and say, okay, I got to show up better, and I got to do more, and I've got to do what the standards are. And I feel like we get into the business world, and as leaders, sometimes we suffer from that imposter syndrome, where we feel like we have to have all the answers or have it all figured out, and none of us do. And on the other side, if I'm new to the company, it's the same thing. I should be asking for feedback too. Make it a mantra at the end of every week. Have the discipline to say, hey, what's success look like, and how am I doing? Give me a rating on 1 to 10, and what do I need to do to hit a 10 next week?
Yeah.
And if you start to ingrain that in people, it becomes the way. It's not, it's going to make me so uncomfortable. It's when I show up here, I want to know. And so for anybody, if you're joining an organization, if you own an organization, make that a part of your DNA. Say, we're a feedback-rich culture. At the end of every week, talk to your boss, talk to your supervisor, whoever it is, and get that feedback. That's one of the things I miss the most from the military. And so we wanted to start doing that when I joined up with Nathan. And again, too much caffeine in me. So long-winded answer to Sid's question. But what led me into that transition is Nathan and I started Warrior 360 together, which is our leadership and organizational kind of human performance company, as an internal brand. Because the warrior is not because we serve. The warrior is inside of all of us. And it's about owning your day versus letting it own you. It's about the choices that we make over the victim of circumstance. Our mantra, choices over circumstances.
That's the best deal he says all the time, man. And it's choices over circumstance. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, think about Ranger School, right? I was being a victim of circumstance, or countless other stories in my life where I want to play the pity card, or I can just own it and get past it and get better, instead of being bitter and always talking about, this is what happened and this is why I am how I am.
These things happen to me. These are my choices.
Exactly. These are the choices I made.
Here.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I mean, and that's like the old story I think that Hemingway shares about, seeing the drunk guy in the bar, and talks about how he's now bankrupt. And he said, well, how did it happen? And he said, well, gradually, and then suddenly. And it's like, it's the compound effect in anything.
Yeah. I've been broke.
Yeah,
that's exactly how it
exactly.
happens.
We deny the reality of the truths, and then it hits us square between the eyes. And so that's why we started that brand with that vision, that philosophy.
And that's Warrior 360.
Warrior 360.
And people can connect with you there.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I need to get on social media. The military beat that out of me when I went into the special operations community, and I'm on LinkedIn. But
that's probably the best place to be.
I mean,
I'm not on there, but I am kind of, but not near as much as Keith would like for me to be.
You need to work that. You've got some questions now.
That's right. So Nathan gave me the blessing, and it was actually a great time to go into business on your own in COVID year 2020.
Oh, yes, fantastic.
Definitely so.
He said, this is going really well internally, and you've picked up a handful of clients externally, and I don't want to be holding you back. He said, why don't you allow us to maintain being a client, but come out from under the umbrella of 68 Ventures and go run this thing yourself? And so, and I'm forever grateful for that. My father's a physician. I didn't take a bunch of business classes in college. I was a poli-sci and public affairs major, and so after that, I really learned an enormous amount about business from Nathan. And then with that blessing, going and doing it on my own. And it's been a remarkable journey and plenty of ups and downs and things that you think folks are committed to. And then it, gives you a 180, but that's part of being a small business owner. And you got to just keep showing up every day, and you got to do the basics. And I think you and I talked about this, but with one of the Green Beret mantras is master the basics. And that's the same with any business, is having the discipline to master the basics and not take your eye off that. And what does that mean? That means that if we're getting feedback and there's things we're not doing well, then let's address them. Let's not just put them in the drawer and say, well, we'll get to it when we get to it. I don't really like having an onboarding process. That makes us too rigid. Well, you got 50 people now, and everybody's had a different experience, and you have some fanatical believers and you have some that are doubters. So you might want to create some consistency, or using a tool that can help them calibrate who they are, like we talked about with insights, or providing a platform for 360 feedback, or even just creating the disciplines around business. And I love how y'all run with the Entrepreneur Operating System. And I've got a bunch of clients that use that, and some that kind of moved out of it, but still hold true to a lot of the principles that it teaches us. And so all those little things I think are so important for us to understand. And it never has to go away. I mean, even the biggest companies I work with that are publicly traded, those CEOs have the same problems and challenges that my clients that are startups and have a team of 10 or 12 compared to 15,000 have. So it doesn't matter what size you are. I mean, especially when you introduce the dynamics and complexities of human beings. I mean, we're a challenging species, and we're all changing.
Business is easy until you add people.
Yeah, exactly. And we're all changing all the time. And so, I mean, I'm a big believer in you got to set expectations, and you can't make assumptions. You got to go back and revisit those often and make sure that as the team grows, you constantly are refining what that means and what it looks like, and help them in that process, because otherwise we start to drift. And then what do? We start forming these narratives in our heads about one another, and they could be the furthest thing from the truth, or none of us are mind readers and we don't know.
Stories.
Yeah, 100%.
Small business a lot of times, and we talk about this all the time on the podcast, is they just forget the process.
Well, the basics, like you said.
The basics.
It's easy, especially entrepreneurs, to go chase the shiny new object, the shiny thing, or the cultural flavor of the month, or the next big deal, and it does take a tremendous amount of discipline to stay focused on the basics. Okay, before we get too far, I've got some notes here and some things that I wanted to kind of talk about. Can I just ask a few questions?
No, you may not.
Okay. Keith, go ahead. All right. So I'm hoping that was a joke. Brad, you've mentioned 360 reviews, feedback, and things like that a lot, and I'm with you. Can you just give us some basic ideas of how one could facilitate that in a business, a small business like 20, 25 people? Sure.
So I'm a believer that you should use something. So it doesn't matter what you use. We subscribe to Insights because that was what I was introduced to. It's been used in the military. It's been used in...
And Insights is a personality profile.
Correct. Excuse me. Yes. We like to refer to it as a self-awareness assessment, but it's a psychometric test. So
and that's what the world needs, is more self-awareness.
I agree.
In every way.
Yeah. I mean, and Keith, when we were talking about just the on-off switch, one of the ways that you can really identify that is have a good understanding of self and a good awareness of self, so that you can then apply that in any given situation. So you transition from self-awareness to that situational leadership of, this is who I need to be right now. And this is maybe who I need to be based off of. It doesn't mean it changes who you are, but you might have to dial up or dial down certain aspects of your personality to best connect with others, to communicate most effectively, or to make sure that we're on the same page. And so you could walk into...
Sometimes this is who I am and you're going to accept me, just don't work.
Oh,
yeah. No,
that's I was like, are you going to finish that? Oh, no, that was, gotcha. That doesn't work.
Yeah, 100. I mean, there's Marshall Goldsmith, a performance coach or leadership coach. He's got that book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And he talks about the 20 bad habits of interpersonal behaviors. And I think it's number 20 is that we exalt our flaws as virtues simply because it's who we are. I mean, like, what a bunch of crock, you know?
That's
I mean,
terrible.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you just need to,
Let's not try to get better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And so I think we can't excuse or justify our bad behavior. Just freaking own it. Just own it.
So the insights stuff, that's what you're saying is a good way to give and receive feedback. How do you facilitate that through that?
So what I do is if I'm working with a group for the first time, I normally, depending on if it's the leadership team or maybe it's even one-to-one on a performance basis. So for example, I've got some clients where they promoted somebody from within. They on the job training is all they've had. They want to get them some more leadership attributes, some strengths in leadership and exercise those muscles just like everything else. And so I'll get introduced to them. And one of the first things I do is insights because I want to know who they are, how they think, how they communicate, because maybe they're mission and task focused, maybe they're people and relationship focused. There's beauty and benefit to either of those, and there's also blind spots and liabilities to either of those. So I want to know that. I want to know, are they more of an introvert than an extrovert or vice versa, because it's going to require more energy for them if they're an introvert and they're leading a group of people to dial up that extroversion to be able to connect with them, especially if they've got extroverts on their team, and vice versa. If they're an extrovert, sometimes they need to pause and let silence do the heavy lifting and let everybody else talk. And so that's a great way for me to understand who I'm working with. It's just one tool of many. I want to understand their values. I want to know their experiences. I want to know about them. And then that's where we tie in the 360 assessment.
Okay.
And so where we use, and that's the Warrior 360, the company name, that 360 is because the journey never ends. And so it's a constant, when we hit a level of mastery, that just means our sphere of influence and impact and opportunity grows. And so now it doesn't mean I've arrived. It just means, okay, I am here with my competencies. Where can I go next? And who else can I bring into the fold here and help? And so, but the 360 process, and I'm doing one with the big company with one of their leaders right now. And we've invited, I think it was 18 raters for one subject. Those are direct reports. That's this individual supervisor. That's peers. And that's others that may interact with this person but aren't in the direct reporting chain of them. We'll ask a bunch of competency type questions and give that feedback based off of a score, 1 to 5. And then there'll be verbatim sections. And there might even be a section on their values, the company values, and how does this individual do on rankings against the values, similar to what you would use on the people analyzer of EOS. And then we'll sit down and we'll look at that and we'll go through it together. And it's quasi-anonymous. Obviously, if you've got 4 direct reports, you know that out of those 4, you probably can read some of the language in the verbatims,
Sure.
But that's not what it's about. And I never want anybody that's taking that to use it as for fear of reprisal, or they need to go reprimand somebody for giving them the
Well, that's just
brutal facts
deflecting from the feedback that you're asking for anyways, and you're
Absolutely.
Just, yeah. But go ahead.
And so we use that. And then what's amazing is I'll pull out their insights and I'll start reading it, and you'll see their strengths and their value to the team statements that are in bold from a psychometric assessment come out real time in what people are saying about them. And so it's validating because now they can read real human feedback and go look at a report that was generated off of an algorithm and see the commonalities, which puts more of an emphasis on why you need to study self. And it's right there in the details. And then we'll look at where some of their blind spots, where can they be more effective as a leader, and we'll build out an action plan around that. And then it's a constant evolution of going and getting feedback. And the first thing I always challenge them on is go to everybody that you know would have done this. You know your supervisor filled it out because that's not really anonymous. We know who that person is. We know who our direct reports are. And often I'll tell them, tell me anybody that you want me to make sure we add to this. And they'll say, yeah, please put my peer group, the other segment presidents on here. I'll say, go to all of them and thank them for the feedback. Hey, I'm on a journey to get better. I appreciate what you said. You don't have to agree with it, but you don't need to say that. All you need to say is, thank you for that. Please help me in my journey. You invite somebody in, people are so much more willing to help than when left to their own devices think that, you're this or you're that and
Thank
you've got
you
it
for
all
your
figured.
feedback. You're fired.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's
awesome, though.
it's a really good, effective tool. And
When I read my insights and the negative parts of the insight, yeah, it was all correct.
yeah. And you're like, I've heard that from my spouse before.
Yes.
Oh, so
That was the big question for me, Keith. What question do you have?
I think you've answered it all.
Yeah.
Like I had a lot of questions but I see how, there was so much leadership examples in the stories that we just heard, from the military to the real world application to all of that. I think
I wish I would have went to school under General Sam.
Yeah, me too.
Man,
and I'll give you one last story on some of the relevance. With what you were talking about, Sid. So I do get the opportunity to also work with some professional athletes, and one that came through that we ran insights on. Mac Jones, quarterback from Alabama, he was prepping for the draft. He was down here working with David Morris at QB Country, who does an amazing job and a phenomenal guy. If y'all haven't ever had a chance to interact with him, he'd be a wonderful guest on the podcast. And we ran Mac through insights, and Mac was very even keeled across the color spectrum, but one prevailing color for him was an introverted feeler, which is patient.
Is that green?
That's green, correct.
Boom.
Empathetic, active listener, loyal. And so just listening to those identifiers right there, think about this high performance athlete. He sat on the bench patiently behind, I believe it was Tua at the time?
Tua, yeah.
Yeah, at Alabama, and then goes on to win his own national championship. Could have transferred at any point and immediately been a starter.
Yeah.
But he was loyal to the team, loyal to the cause, loyal to the process, and he stuck it out. Goes into the NFL, and an article that's jumped out to me was the first year he was playing in the league, and as he started gaining momentum and playing, he bought all of his offensive linemen Christmas presents. And it wasn't I'm going to go buy them all the same thing. I got him a tenderloin. Individual presents that were specific to that person and what they liked. And then he got them all in investment in Bitcoin, I believe, something like that.
Oh, well, that's not worth
that
much
not.
anymore.
He didn't know at the time.
Bitcoin's
That's
okay
negative
now.
right now.
But so there was an article written, and it was published up in the Northeast, and it was about how they interviewed some of the linemen, and these seasoned veteran linemen said that was the nicest thing that any other player had ever done for them, because they had never experienced something like that. He didn't do it. He didn't do it for any other reason than that's just the type of person that he is. And so he didn't think twice about that. But that's just how it comes out in who he is as a person and his personality. And I love sharing that, because it doesn't matter where you fall on that color spectrum. We're all capable of extraordinary things. A lot of times you would think, well, in order for you to be at a position like that at the highest level of play, you must be a high red who's assertive, aggressive, dominating, challenging, competitive, all these things. Yeah, he's got that in him. But maybe that's not the natural inclined color of who he always is. He's got that on-off switch of when he cuts that on, when he's on the field, and when he's off the field, he's darn good at building relationships and building trust on a team and connecting with his teammates. Heck yeah, it is, and especially from the quarterback's position. So anyway, I just share that because, that's what I find fascinating about it. Is you watch these people and then go play out in their careers, you can see incredible success, but it's grounded in good self-awareness.
Yeah. Man, that is
in everything, know thyself.
That's right. That's right.
And so I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Paul Conti. He's a psychiatrist, and he was talking about and everybody wants to know what self is and what high-performing self looks like. And he said the highest performers of people that understand, that have self-awareness, are people who have gratitude and agency. And I think that's big, because if we know what we're going to pursue, which is agency, and we have gratitude for it, then it kind of answers it for itself.
I like that. I like that. It's so true. You've got to recognize all the people that have poured into us, and I think that gives you that grateful heart. so that you can do it for others. And then, yeah, I mean, you stay on that growth journey with where I want to go, and it never ends. And I heard something this morning I thought was great too that I'd close with, and it's the biggest enemy of future success is past success. And just as we're on that journey, making sure that we always counter that complacency that can creep in. And that was the president of Chick-fil-A that said it. But it's so true because, I mean, that's how you get in that 1% of elite businesses that survive beyond the 5-year mark is you can't ever look to yesterday for what's going to guarantee you today. You got to earn it every single day. And you got to earn that right as a leader. I mean, we're all privileged to be in leadership roles.
That's a freaking good point.
You got to earn it every single day. Because the minute we think we've arrived, going back to General Sam's dad's quote,
once you think you're right.
Yeah, we're rotten as a leader. And so we got to earn it. But, well, thank you very much,
Man,
guys. I
thank you.
appreciate y'all having me today.
Thank you so much.
Look, he told the whole story, and then he closed us out.
I know it. And that was
guy's
killer. We didn't
awesome.
have to do anything.
Man, I'm just sitting over here drinking my Topo
I
Chico.
hope he doesn't start a podcast.
I hope he does. It'd be fantastic. I'd be a listener.
Yeah.
Man, Brad, thank you so much for being on. We had been actually talking about this for a while. I'm glad we were able to make this work. I got a hell of a lot out of this, and I hope our listeners did too. Tell us one more time, how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I mean, find me on LinkedIn, or you can go to warrior360.co. And
that one threw me off. .co. I kept going.
.co, not .com. That's right. Yeah.
And LinkedIn, if you're into that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead. That's probably the best way to find him. Just Brad Israel.
Yes,
or
correct.
Warrior 360.
Yep, both of them are on there, correct.
Man, thanks so much. And man, I'm going to thank you for our leaders. I mean, for our listeners. That's a good story, man, and great lessons. They're all hidden in there. And dude, if you're not out looking for mentors, that ought to be the best story ever. Just how mentors really shape your life, and asking for feedback and getting some feedback, and not making the excuses for where you are in life, and trying to chart a new course, every day, I guess.
You got to remember, you're not the victim of your circumstance.
You're not. Choices over circumstances.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks for being on. Keith, you want to close us out? Anything else we got to say?
No, man, that's good. Go. Thanks to our sponsors.
Yeah.
We couldn't do this without them.
Yeah, please.
Amen.
All right. And visit the website. Keith's got all kinds of stuff on it.
overlaplife.com.
All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk to y'all later.
Peace.
Hey there. My good friend Steve Bousquet and his partner, Christine Era, the owners of Green Profit Academy, are super excited about a new product they've got coming out. If you didn't know, they're the authors of Profit First for the Lawn Care Business. And it's a book written by Christine Era. Steve plays a big role in sort of adding to that. But they've got that book. It's already out. But if you're an audiobook listener, and you just learn better by listening, they've got the audio version coming out, and I think this is really cool. They've got Christine Era narrating the audiobook, and she does a really good job. I've heard some clips of it. It's pretty fantastic. And Mike Michalowicz, the original author of Profit First, he reads the foreword. And so they've got a book launch that's going to come out on their website, Green Profit Academy, and you should stay tuned for more information about that. They're going to have some giveaways. They're going to have some other special deals going on. But the book itself, the audio book, will come out September 12th. So please be on the lookout for that. And if you need some help with Profit First for your green industry business, please give them a call or look them up, Green Profit Academy. Thanks so much. Let me tell you about one of our sponsors, Chris Drogmiller. He's with CMD Fencing. One, I really appreciate his support to the podcast. He listens to the podcast, but long before that, he has done several projects for me at my home, at our business, and the dude just does an awesome job. One of the things I really like about him is it's basically just him and someone that helps him. His attention to detail is phenomenal. The work is always high quality. If you've ever had a fence built, you know that the gate itself and how it opens and shuts is kind of the stamp of quality. It always works well. I've made him make some interesting kind of fencing where it's all horizontal. He had no problems with that, did a great job. And the guy is freaking awesome. He's easy to work with, and he does a fantastic job. He's a firefighter, so you know, he works 2 days on and 2 days off. So he comes in and knocks my project out on the days that he's off. And the dude's awesome. You can find him on our website, overlaplife.com. You can find him on Facebook, CMD Fencing. And let's see, his phone number is 901-484-5546. So if you need a fence, need some fence work, call Chris Drogmiller, CMD Fencing.